Lelouch of the Resurrection, the fourth movie in the Code Geass movie timeline. Where does it fit within the overall universe of Code Geass? And what is its purpose and place? And is it canon? These are all things we will discuss. Let's get into it. Lelouch of the Resurrection, as I mentioned, is the fourth movie in the Code Geass movie timeline. People always seem to ask, what is the purpose of the movies? Are they canon? And what are the major differences? So, for starters, the major differences between the movie timeline and the series timeline is pretty simple, actually. For starters, the overall structure of the movie timeline is relatively similar to the show in that the ending is the same. A lot of the events that take place are the same. However, the biggest divergent point in the movies is the loss of Shirley's father, which caused a chain reaction which led to Shirley actually surviving within the movies. But as we know in the show, she doesn't survive. And the reason why is that during the Battle of Narita, Shirley's father was working as a scientist in the town. And when Zero enacted his plan to destroy the Sigurodite, which caused a giant mudslide, Shirley's father was caught up in the devastation and was killed by Zero. Now, all of this led to Shirley's complete heartbreak and her search and hunger for the truth. Who is Zero? And what is behind the mask? So as Shirley went down this rabbit hole, right, she discovered that Zero is in fact Lelouch, the love of her life, her best friend, the person she's known for so long. So obviously this caused a lot of turmoil with her in the show, which leads to her untimely and unfortunate death by the hands of Rollo because she gains her memories back in Season 2, which Rollo perceived as a threat to Lelouch, so he killed her. So that was the catalyst for Shirley's death in the show. However, in the movie timeline, Shirley's father never dies in that accident. So obviously, he never dies in the movies. She has no reason to pursue Zero or harbor any ill feelings towards him, so she never discovers the truth of Lelouch being Zero, which doesn't lead to her getting killed in the movies. And I've said this before, but I think that that's honestly a big mistake because I feel like the death of Shirley in the show is such a meaningful and impactful moment for not just Shirley, but also for Rollo and his relationship with Lelouch, and obviously for Lelouch himself, because of how much she meant to Lelouch, and the heartbreak and sorrow you could see on Lelouch is such a great character builder for him because it shows you that through all the things that he did that were questionable, it showed how much compassion he had for the people around him, and that is something that is to be revered. So I was never a fan of Shirley getting killed in the movie timeline, so that is the big sticking point between the difference of the show and the movies. Now this leads up to Lelouch of the Resurrection, the newest movie in the timeline and a sequel of sorts to the show. Now it's not a definitive, legit, canonical sequel to the show, because there's two timelines. So you have the series timeline, which is the official timeline, and then you have the movie timeline. And the reason why the creator did this, Goro Taniguchi, who said in an interview that he wanted the movie timeline to act as a what-if scenario to the events of the show, to bring a fresh perspective to the entire series. Now this all leads up to Lelouch of the Resurrection, which takes place 1 year after the events of the Zero Requiem at the end of Season 2 of the show. And this is a world that is filled with peace and tranquility as we see the United Federation of Nations being the one that holds the world together in a peaceful union because of all the united countries that are working together, including Britannia and Japan. However, as we know, in the world, conflict is always brewing and there will always be conflict within the world. And that is where this movie takes place, in the land of Zilkstan, which is a region that has always been surrounded by war and is controlled by a family of Geass users that were actually a faction of the Geass Order that broke off from them hundreds of years ago called Farloff, led by Princess Shamna and her brother, Shalio, who have access to a man-made thought elevator given that they were a part of the Geass Order at some point in time. They actually have a man-made thought elevator, and that is where the entire crux of the plot takes place, because they want to capture Nunnally because she has a connection to the thought elevator, and that will allow Princess Shamna to reach the collective unconsciousness and try to create a world where her country can be the dominant force and be safe from all the war and bloodshed that they suffer through. Now, where Lelouch comes into this whole equation, right, is that he is actually still alive. And the reason he's still alive makes a whole bunch of sense if you really think about it. So, every person who ever attained Geass, eventually they become immortal. And the reason why is because code bearers are the ones who give the contract out to the user. So, obviously, people like C2 and V2 and C2's master, who was the priestess hundreds of years ago. Those code bearers give their power to a user like Lelouch or Charles, and then once the contract is fulfilled, the user gains the gift or curse, I would say, of immortality to the user. So just like what happened with C2 with the priestess, right? She made a contract with C2, and then once the contract was fulfilled, the priestess passed on her immortality to C2. Same thing with Charles, right? He completed the contract with V2, so what happened was V2 transferred his immortality to Charles. And then when Lelouch killed Charles in C's world, Charles inadvertently transferred his power of immortality to Lelouch, a fact that was not known to Lelouch at the time, so he believed he was still mortal, and when the Zero Requiem commenced, he thought he was just going to die and that would be the end of him. However, he survived, and that's how he ends up in Lelouch of the Resurrection. So even though the movie is technically not canon, for me, I almost treat it as a headcanon of sorts to the show, because I truly believe that it is a great successor to what the show was doing. And if you could cut out the part with Shirley being alive, which I know it's not easy to do, a lot of people can't do that, but if you're able to just cut her out of the movie, which she's in for only a few scenes, honestly, she doesn't really need to even be in the movie. But if you can get rid of her mentally, then it is actually such a great sequel to the show, and I don't think it ruins the show at all. Which I know is the big consensus among Geass fans, is that the ending was so perfect and it was so beautiful that anything after that would ruin it. And it was beautiful and it was perfect, but I do believe there was room to explore the further depths of the world of Code Geass, and there were so many nuances that we could go into with the Geass Order, what it's like having an entire family of Geass users control a country and how they use those powers to their advantage, and most importantly, seeing the world that Lelouch created. The beauty of the ending, right, is that he gave his life to create a better future for everyone he loved. So to be able to go and peer into that future and to see what everyone thought of him post Zero Requiem, where the ones closest to him knew what he was trying to do and knew the sacrifice he made and how they react to that, how they see him in a new light. And I think the movie does a great job fleshing that out and showing you all the different people that you didn't get to see at the end of the series, who thought he just turned into this wicked person that was trying to destroy and dominate the world. Once they see the revelation of what he was actually trying to achieve with the Zero Requiem and how they felt about it afterwards, that's the beauty of the movie. So people like Ogi and Colin and Suzaku and his sister Nanali, seeing them give him the recognition and admiration and love he deserves truly is just such a beautiful thing. I mean, Ogi was literally going to kill himself because of how ashamed he was that he betrayed Zero after trusting him the entire time. That's how much shame Ogi had, and then Lelouch was like, nah, you're cool, fam. Or Colin, when she first met Lelouch again in the movie, she felt so remorseful for how it all ended and how she wasn't able to see his grand plan, and she felt like she betrayed him. The same with Nanali, right? I mean, that scene at the end of the movie where she is having this heartfelt conversation with her brother about how she wanted to bear the sins of the world and the sins of his actions together because she finally understood the Zero Requiem and what Lelouch went through and all the pain and suffering and anguish that he had to bear onto himself. And the fact that she admitted that she totally understands that and loves him for it and wants to share that responsibility. It is such a heartwarming, beautiful conclusion to the movie, and that is why I think this movie absolutely rocks. And I'm glad that is a part of the universe of Code Geass. And that's basically all I have for you guys today. So I hope you liked that discussion, and let me know your thoughts on the movie, on the different timelines, what you want to see in future Geass projects. And for all things video games and anime, keep it here with Geass Gamer. I'll see you guys later. Peace!